Robert Fischer, March 9, 1943, January 17, 2008, was an American chess grandmaster and the 11th world chess champion. Qualifying for the 1972 World Championship, Fischer swept matches with Mark Taimanov and Bent Larsen by 6-0 scores. Fischer won the title match against Boris Spassky of the USSR in Reykjavik, Iceland. In 1975, Fischer refused to defend his title when an agreement could not be reached with FIDE, chess's international governing body, over the match conditions. Consequently, the Soviet challenger Anatoly Karpov was named world champion by default. The 8th world champion, Mikhail Tal, was the fiercest attacking player ever to hold the title. As a young and irresistible force, he won the Soviet championship in 1957 and 1958. Following victories at the 1958 Interzonal Tournament and the 1959 Candidates Tournament, he became the then youngest world champion in 1960. Bad health and a dominant Mikhail Botvinnik would lead to his loss of the crown just a year later. Known as the magician from Riga, many players were inspired by Tal's highly creative and explosive style. Particularly during his early years, his imagination and powerful play led to complicated situations on the board. Robert Fischer playing as white versus Mikhail Tal playing as black, Candidates 1959, Round 21, Bled, Yugoslav. Sicilian defense, open, Scheveningen, Sozin attack. This game shows something about Tal that is often overlooked. Sometimes building up pressure and mobilizing pieces is the key to winning. The beautiful sacrifices are just the icing on the cake. Tal, on the other hand, isn't going to bother anyone with analysis of what's best. C5 wildest with or without test. Fischer plays the typical knight f3, playing down a very common and very aggressive Sicilian line. Main line. C take d4 isn't exactly forced, but it is by far the most often played line. The idea behind this move and the Sicilian in general is to create imbalances and complications. Already, we see that potential in this position. Regaining the pawn. Black develops and challenges the white pawn. A very natural move. Defending the pawn and continuing development. Again, the most common and very natural. Many Sicilians look like this before they branch off into multiple variations. And with this move, Tal moves into the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. A very interesting line where black prepares for a queenside attack whilst limiting white's maneuverability. Fischer continues developing aggressively. A nice move that reduces white's attacking options. Black is now free to develop comfortably for a while. In anticipation of b5, white backs off a little early. b3 is now a comfortable outpost for the highly potent bishop. Developing the black bishop and preparing to castle. This position is, of course, very potent and very imbalanced, but there is very little to do but follow the book. That's one of the very few cons of following a book line. This isn't necessarily the most common white response, but you see what Fischer is doing. Should Tal choose to castle to the king side right away, Fischer is breathing down his neck with a few pawn pushes. Should Tal stay where he is and continue development, white has some power in the center and may be able to plow clean through. Very logical, very aggressive, very Fischer. And Tal opts to castle. Queen f3 is the main book move. From f3, the white queen has plenty of maneuverability, not to mention the e5 push that he's opened up for himself. The most common, very logical move. Now, white has lost all purpose in e5, and black has a queen placed quite nicely. White castles. And black begins the queenside push, while still keeping kingside options with bishop b7. This is, of course, all still book moves, but there is still some incredible strategy here. A clever white pawn push that leaves little in way of black choices. The a2 g8 diagonal, where the black king is, will have to be opened up a little. But first black continues his attack for as long as he safely can. An interesting move. By some standards, Fischer's included this move is still book. F take e6 would have been an interesting option. And now black makes the basically forced push. Only choice. And Tal develops another piece. Pretty much forced for the purposes of saving that pawn. And now black is developed nicely with plenty of options, as is white. A very imbalanced and unclear position. The last piece that Fischer needed to develop is now mobile. Perhaps Fischer is looking at b6 as a weakness. Tal builds up another complication of sorts with this move. Bishop f2 is fine. Perhaps Fischer was looking to reinforce e4 with rook f2 e1. However, rook f2 e1 before, or even without bishop f2, would have been better. Lining up a little extra pressure on the diagonal. Bishop b5 may have been better. White defends the weak pawn. While Tal has some advantage, he makes a point of opening the position up. A very intelligent move from the standpoint of an attacking player. Fischer no longer has any way of supporting the pawn, and so he must accept that the position will be opened. The best recapturing option. Fischer centers his knight to a more useful position. A simple tool in an attacker's arsenal, utilizing unused pieces. Tal moves his knight so as to pin Fischer's knight and to move in on the white king. A less than perfect move. Bishop g3 or even c3 would have been better. Very clever. A move very Talish. g4 may have been better, but Tal is bound to walk out of this with advantage anyways. Tal didn't need to do this. H take g6 was better, but this clearly works too. Judging by the numbers, this move is not as good as g take h7 check. Fischer, however, sees that the game is heading in one direction and so tries to throw a twist in it. Not a bad move by any means. Tal isn't fazed. White throws a check. Tal is fine with it. Now technically material is even, and Fischer isn't wrong to start pushing back, but we can see that Tal has the tactical advantage. Best. And the game begins to simplify. Depending on one's viewpoint, this is good for either side. Tal, who is winning, would be happy simplifying into a win. Fischer, who isn't down material yet, is plenty happy diffusing the black attack. Capture with check. Recaptures. Tal moves his queen to safety. Fischer is not backing down without a fight. Knight e6, perhaps a better move on paper, would have done that. Tal moves another piece into the fray while defending e5. Now in a little bit of trouble, Fischer attempts to lessen the pressure with a sacrifice. Tal sees no better option than to take Fischer up on his offer. Pretty much forced. A very nice find by Tal. When a powerful forcing win is available, why not finish the game with it? The ability to finish one games is something very important at the highest levels. Fischer is out of ideas. This was a nice move to add some complications, though. Yes, you'll take my sacrifice, you coward. And so Fischer does. Mate in 6. And Fischer resigns with the loss clearly in view. Thank you for watching the video. Please like, share, and subscribe.